All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really complex and honestly haunting story. The death of Natalie Wood.
It's one that still raises so many questions.
Absolutely. We've gathered a lot of material, articles, official reports, memoirs to try and navigate this. Our goal here is to sift through the different versions, look at the known facts, and just try to understand why this case, after all these years, still feels so unresolved.
It really is a mix of Hollywood glamour, a very real, deep-seated fear, and this tragic night at sea.
Let's start with Natalie Wood herself. I mean, a true Hollywood legend. Started as a child actress.
Oh, absolutely. From Miracle on 34th Street as a kid, then huge roles like Rebel Without a Cause, West Side Story, just iconic.
And her personal life was pretty public, too, especially her relationship with Robert Wagner. Married, divorced, then remarried him.
Yes, and they had their daughter, Courtney. Natalie also had her daughter, Natasha, from her marriage to Richard Gregson.
Okay, but there's this crucial piece of background information that, well, it hangs over everything.
You mean her fear of water?
Exactly. Can you elaborate on that? It wasn't just a casual dislike, was it?
No, not at all. It was apparently a profound, lifelong phobia of dark water. There are stories about her mother telling her a fortune teller predicted she'd die by drowning, and Natalie took that very seriously.
Wow.
And it wasn't just a vague fear. When she was 10, filming The Green Promise, there was an accident. A bridge scene went wrong.
Oh, I remember reading about this.
Yeah, a supposedly safe bridge collapsed. She fell into the water, broke her wrist. That incident apparently cemented this terror. Reports say she was even afraid to wash her hair afterwards, had nightmares about drowning.
That's incredibly significant given how she died. It makes you question so much.
It fundamentally changes how you look at the possibility of her just, casually getting into a dinghy alone at night in the dark water.
Right. So let's set the scene for that final weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Thanksgiving, 1981.
Mm-hmm. They're on their yacht, the Splendour. It's a 60-foot boat, moored off Catalina Island, California.
And who was on board?
Natalie, Robert Wagner, Christopher Walken, who is starring with Natalie in the movie Brainstorm at the time, and the skipper, Dennis Davern, a longtime friend and employee.
Okay, so let's unpack this weekend. It didn't exactly start smoothly, did it?
No. The trip began Friday, November 27th, and apparently there was an argument between Wood and Wagner that first night.
An argument serious enough that...
That Davern actually took Natalie ashore in the dinghy, the Prince Valiant. They checked into a hotel in Avalon for the night.
And Davern initially didn't mention this to the police.
Correct. He lied about it in his first statement, which, adds another layer of complexity later on.
So Saturday the 28th, they're back on the yacht. What happens then?
They spend some time on the boat, then later go ashore for dinner and drinks at Doug's Harbor Reef restaurant.
And this dinner, it sounds like it was pretty fueled.
Oh, definitely. According to the waitress, they had multiple bottles of wine, champagne. One of the men was drinking daiquiris, too. Witnesses said Natalie seemed out of sorts, didn't eat much, was maybe a bit unsteady when they left.
There was something about a glass being thrown.
Yes, Walken later said he threw a glass first, and Natalie copied him. But it points to some tension.
And there were undercurrents, right? Jealousy.
It seems so. Davern noticed what he felt was flirtation between Natalie and Walken, and Wagner was reportedly jealous. He'd even visited the Brainstorm set, apparently worried about Walken. And then there were whispers, maybe Natalie was jealous too, about Wagner and his heart-to-heart co-star Stephanie Powers. So yeah, lots of potential friction there.
Okay, so after dinner, they head back to the Splendour, and the argument resumes.
According to Wagner's memoir, yes, but he described it as nonviolent. He said it was a political debate with Walken, carrying over from dinner, and Natalie got bored and went to her cabin.
Did anyone else hear anything different? People on nearby boats?
That's a really critical piece,
Yeah.
Yes. Witnesses John Payne and Marilyn Wayne were on a boat close by. They reported hearing shouts around midnight.
Shouts? Like what?
Wayne specifically remembered hearing a woman yelling, "Help me! Someone please help me! I'm drowning!" over and over, maybe for 15 minutes.
Oh my God. Drowning.
Yes. And then chillingly, she said she heard a man's voice, slurred, kind of mocking, say something like, "Oh, hold on, we're coming to get you."
That's deeply disturbing.
It really is. Especially when you contrast it with the official story later.
So sometime after that, after 11 p.m. perhaps,
Yeah.
Natalie disappears from the yacht.
Right. Wagner's account is that he went to their stateroom around 11:05 p.m., maybe later, to say goodnight or check on her, and she wasn't there. Then he noticed the dinghy was gone, too.
And the calls for help? There was a delay.
It's a significant one, yes. Wagner alerted Davern. They apparently searched the yacht first. Then Wagner called for a shoreboat operator. Davern radioed Baywatch only around 1:30 a.m.
And the Coast Guard?
Wagner didn't contact the Coast Guard until 3:30 a.m., hours after she was likely last seen.
Which seems odd.
It's one of the many things that has fueled speculation for years.
Her body was found the next morning.
Yes, around 7:30 a.m. on Sunday, November 29th. Floating face down, about a mile away from the Splendour.
And what was she wearing?
A flannel nightgown, blue wool socks, and a red down jacket.
And the dinghy.
Found washed ashore nearby. But the details are important. Ignition off, gear shift in neutral, oars locked in place. It suggests maybe she never even started it or tried to.
Okay, so the initial investigation, the coroner was Dr. Thomas Noguchi, right? Coroner to the stars.
That's right. His initial findings noted her blood alcohol content was 0.14%. He also noted superficial bruises on her arms and legs and an abrasion on her left cheek.
And the ruling.
Accidental drowning.
So what was Noguchi's theory of how it happened? How did she end up in the water accidentally?
His hypothesis was basically that she might have gone to secure the dinghy, maybe it was banging against the hull, or perhaps she intended to take it somewhere, though that seems unlikely given her attire and phobia. He theorized she slipped while trying to board it or tie it.
Fell in, the heavy jacket waterlogged.
Exactly. Weighed down, disoriented by alcohol, maybe hit her head. He pointed to fingernail scratches found on the side of the dinghy as evidence she might have clung to it before succumbing to hypothermia and exhaustion.
But here's where Natalie's sister, Lana Wood, immediately raised a red flag.
Oh, huge one. Lana's immediate reaction was powerful. My sister was not a swimmer and did not know how to swim, and she would never go to another boat or to shore dressed in a nightgown and socks.
That statement just cuts right through the accidental theory, doesn't it? Especially given the phobia.
It really does. Why would someone terrified of dark water who couldn't swim attempt to get into a dinghy alone at night dressed like that? It directly challenges the core premise of Noguchi's initial explanation.
So the case was closed as an accident, but the doubts never really went away.
Not at all. They lingered for decades.
Until 2011. 30 years later. What happened?
A major shift. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department reopened the investigation. The catalyst was Dennis Davern.
The skipper. The one who initially lied about taking her ashore that Friday.
Exactly. He came forward publicly changing his story. He admitted he lied in his original police statements back in '81.
And what was his new story?
He now claimed Robert Wagner was responsible for her death. He said he heard Wagner and Wood arguing loudly in their cabin, then silence, then sounds of distress or maybe a thud from the deck.
That's a huge accusation.
It absolutely is, and it led to a whole new phase.
So the investigation is reopened? What did the new look find?
Well, it led to a reevaluation of the evidence, including a new look at the autopsy findings. In 2012, the coroner's office officially amended Natalie Wood's death certificate.
From accidental drowning to what?
To drowning and other undetermined factors. They specifically stated that the circumstances of how she ended up in the water couldn't be clearly established.
And the bruises. Noguchi had called them superficial.
The new report questioned that. It suggested the bruises and the abrasion on her cheek were more consistent with injuries sustained before she entered the water, not necessarily from the fall or struggling in the water itself.
That implies something else happened.
It certainly opened up that possibility much more formally. Then, in 2018, investigators named Robert Wagner more of a person of interest.
Person of interest, not suspect.
Correct. They clarified it remained a suspicious death investigation, not officially a murder case. But then, in 2022, the Sheriff's Department stated Wagner was no longer considered a person of interest, though the case technically remains open and unsolved.
So it's still in limbo, basically. Okay, let's really dig into these conflicting stories from the people on the boat. Wagner first.
Wagner has consistently maintained, more or less, his theory. She likely went to deal with the dinghy because it was banging against the yacht, maybe slipped on the swim step, which could be slick with algae, possibly hit her head, and fell in.
But you mentioned a discrepancy earlier. About a wine bottle.
Ah, yes. In his initial accounts, he didn't mention any violent outburst. But in his 2009 autobiography, Pieces of My Heart, he admitted he did smash a wine bottle during the argument with Walken earlier that evening. He'd previously suggested maybe rough seas caused something like that.
Okay, contrast that with Davern's later account.
It's dramatically different. Davern claimed Wagner flew into a jealous rage, specifically confronting Walken, smashing the bottle and yelling something like, "What are you trying to do? Fuck my wife."
Wow.
Davern also alleged that after Natalie disappeared, when he suggested turning on the yacht's floodlights or starting the engine to search, Wagner discouraged him, saying he didn't want to alert the people nearby.
That's incredibly damning if true.
If true. But then there's the issue of Davern's credibility. He lied initially. He later sold his story to tabloids and co-wrote a book. So you have to weigh his motives.
Right. What about Walken? Where does his account fit?
Interestingly, Walken's description of the argument itself, the intensity, the bottle breaking, seems to align more with Davern's version than Wagner's initial, more subdued description. However, Walken has always publicly maintained he believes Natalie's death was an accident. He cooperated with the reopened investigation, but hasn't really elaborated much beyond that.
So 3 people on board, potentially 3 different perspectives or recollections of what happened leading up to her disappearance.
Exactly. It highlights how memory, bias, maybe self-preservation can really cloud the picture in situations like this.
And this tragedy even divided Natalie Wood's own family.
Profoundly so. Her daughter, Natasha Gregson Wagner, who Wagner raised after Natalie's death, firmly believes it was an accident.
She made a documentary, right?
Yes, Natalie Wood. What remains behind in 2020? She defends Wagner passionately, saying he adored Natalie and would never have hurt her. She believes the accident theory.
But Natalie's sister, Lana.
Lana Wood has always suspected foul play, or at least that it wasn't a simple accident. She wrote her own book, Little Sister, detailing her investigation and doubts.
Does she accuse Wagner directly?
She's been careful, saying she can't imagine him intentionally hurting Natalie, but she points to the drinking, the fighting, and says things happen in those situations. She believes the full truth hasn't come out.
It's heartbreaking to see that split within the family itself.
It really underscores the deep wounds and the lingering uncertainty surrounding this case.
So after all this time, all the investigations, the conflicting stories, where does that leave us? The questions just seem to hang there.
They really do. Even Dwayne Rasher, who was the lead detective on the reopened case for years, admitted quite frankly, I can't tell you exactly how she got on the water, if the lead investigator says that.
It speaks volumes. So here we have Natalie Wood, this huge Hollywood star living under this intense spotlight, but privately carrying this paralyzing fear of the very element that claimed her life.
It's such a tragic irony.
Decades of searching for answers, testimony that contradicts itself, official rulings being changed, yet we still don't definitively know what happened on the Splendour that night.
The truth remains just out of reach.
So the final thought maybe is this. How do we possibly reconcile that deep, documented phobia with the scenario of her ending up in the dark water alone? And what does this whole enduring, sad mystery reveal about the secrets that can exist just beneath the surface, even in lives lived so publicly?
It makes you wonder what truths we never uncover.